Welcome to Kibbe on Liberty. Anthony, how's it going?
Thanks, Matt. Great to be here. It's going great.
I'm glad that we finally got to do this. We have a lot more in common than either you or I knew at the time. But tell us, I've had one of your colleagues on talking about white coat waste, but why don't you give people an idea of who you are and why you founded White Coat Waste?
Sure. So my name is Anthony Bellotti. I am the founder and president of the White Coat Waste Project, and we are a government watchdog and bipartisan campaign with a mission to obliterate the Fed's $20 billion animal testing business. I have a strange story in that I worked in an animal lab myself. When I was 17 years old, I'm going to date myself a little bit, summer of 1995, I did an internship in a taxpayer-funded experimentation laboratory in Manhattan. I didn't know anything about animals at the time. I didn't know about animal testing. I was no vegetarian. I was nothing. I was just a college kid looking for a letter of recommendation for a college pre-med track. I wanted to go into medicine like my father, and I thought working in a prestigious teaching hospital, getting a good letter of recommendation would be a fast track for my college application process. And I remember on my first day in the animal testing lab, we were working with pigs, mostly pigs. They had a lot of other animals too, but I was working with pigs, and I remember hearing the scream of a pig in my ear, and saying, if this is one of the good labs, what the hell are they doing in the bad ones? Right? I was horrified, and I said, I got to do something about this. I want to fight back. I want to dedicate my life to doing something about this problem. Now, look, I was 17. I didn't pay taxes. I didn't know this was taxpayer funded. I just didn't like what I saw. I still don't like what I see. But I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know how to fight back when I was 17 years old. I didn't know how to fight back for many, many years. And you'd think I would have pursued a career in the animal rights establishment, going to work at one of the big groups. That's what you do when you have a moment like that, right? Wrong. I decided to learn a skill set that I could acquire, a toolkit, if you will, and I went and worked in Washington, D.C. I bounced around a little bit, but I worked on a lot of political campaigns in my former life, political agencies, public affairs campaigns, issue advocacy work, fighting against government healthcare. Again, these were not my personal politics necessarily, but my clients at the time. I worked for Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger and his reelection, Senator Lisa Murkowski, her reelection. Did a lot of ballot initiatives and Obamacare. So anyway, as I was working on a lot of the issues in the room in the late 2000s, a lot of the dominant factors were about fighting taxpayer-funded of Planned Parenthood and taxpayer funding with Obamacare. And it hit me. And I said, okay, my clients are getting a lot of success with defund, cutting the funding for various federal problems. Well, animal testing is mostly taxpayer funded. Virtually all of it. Not all of it, but virtually all of it. The government is the largest funder of animal abuse in the room. There's no organization out there that works exclusively on taxpayer-funded animal testing, and I know a thing or two about how to cut spending. If an animal test could be funded, it could be defunded. Hence, the White Coat Waste Project was born.
What year was this?
I founded it officially in 2013. We started. It was started from scratch. You know, there were no big donors or anything like that. I had a full-time job. I started it from my own pocket. It was just a kind of a, if you will, a glorified hobby to start. But I always obviously wanted to do something and make this a much bigger thing than with my life's work. But I needed to pay bills and I had to eat. And the organization started getting traction with very little resources. People were receptive. People were coming out and saying things like, "Where have you been all my life?" It's I'm a Republican, or I'm a conservative, or I'm a libertarian, and I'm SOL with the establishment, groups who want to ban meat or tax meat, or say I can't hunt, but I love dogs, and I love my dog. And Democrats and liberals loved it too, because they were the ones saying, well, finally, we've got people like voices like Glenn Beck or other center-right voices saying things like, the animal testing, they're the socialists, the animal abusers. Usually we're the guys, being called commies and hippies and commies, but we had turned the table. So we got a lot of support right away with the receptive message. It was fresh and it was tiny. I mean, this was like a small, I was the biggest funder, and that tells you something. I mean, at the time. So we got out of the gate, we got a lot of traction, got a lot of visibility, and I was able within a couple years to take it full time. Didn't go full time until our first full year was 2016. And, our budget was still tiny at the time. I think it was under $500,000 in our first full-time full year. I hired Justin Goodman, who was our senior vice president at the end of 2016, to launch our first public policy and advocacy campaigns. We put out as our very first effort right after, I think it was about a week or so after had to have been November of 2016, after the election, presidential. We put out an investigation. We did a federal audit of all the dog labs across the government. We called it Spending to Death. Spending to Death. An audit of what the NIH, the CDC, the FDA, all the horrible acronym agencies that we love so much here. What were they doing with the dogs? Where are the dogs? What are they doing to them? What do we know and not know with the money? Where are the transparency failures? The Veterans Administration, the FDA, the CDC, the Pentagon. And we were off to the races. That little report that we put out in the fall of 2016 led to our campaigns that made history at the Veterans Administration, cleaning out all of the painful dog tests they were doing there, and to obviously one of the investigations we are known internationally now for, which was Beaglegate. Dr. Fauci's funding of dog tests at the NIH and across the country.
Dog torture.
In fact, the first sandfly, the infamous sandflies, the capsule of the sandflies eating their ears, eating the dogs alive. We exposed it in 2016, actually, but a lot of people don't realize that. Fauci was doing it, funding it in-house, not just granting it out to a school, right? In-house at NIAID. They were doing it in the basement, the basement lab, so to speak. We lit that up in 2016. At the end of 2016, nobody knew who Dr. Fauci was. Nobody knew. I mean, that was 4 years before he was a household name. We didn't mention him by name, but we mentioned NIAID. So, we had been following the money for some time. Over the next few years.
By the way, let me guess. Once he got busted for doing this on American soil, he outsourced it to China.
Well, outsourcing,
that's a joke, but it's probably true, too.
I mean, you're not that far off. I mean, outsourcing, we now know about Tunisia, the iconic photo the two beagles in the nets.
Yeah.
I mean, so you're not that far off. They did outsource. That was the experiment. The same thing with the dogs getting eaten by flies. They were doing it in-house in the Beltway.
We got caught, so we're going to do it in a less transparent way.
And do it in a less transparent way through a pass-through, through a school in Ohio, which then sent the money to Tunisia.
Sounds familiar, yeah.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a crash course in our history.
Yeah. Free the People is embarking on our most ambitious project to date to document and expose the lies behind the greatest public health failure in my lifetime. We're talking to insiders with firsthand knowledge of the government's role in funding, creating, and then covering up the COVID-19 virus in our exclusive new documentary series, The Cover-Up. But I need your help. We won't get to the bottom of this scandal alone, so I'm asking viewers to crowdsource any information that could be helpful to our investigation. If you're watching this, you already know what the government did during lockdowns was unforgivable. Help us get to the truth and prevent it from ever happening again. To get involved, go to freethepeople.org/coverup. That's freethepeople.org/coverup. The truth is out there. And obviously, you guys have become famous for, in the course of going after this disgusting, unethical, and financially stupid forms of research, you outed weird, dangerous gain-of-function research.
Mm-hmm. Probably the most important campaign we ever did was uncovering NIH funding for the Wuhan lab, the lab leak. That was us. The world learned about it from our investigation. The Daily Mail's headline on Easter Sunday of 2020, U.S. government, I'm paraphrasing, I don't have it in front of me, but U.S. government gives $3.7 million to the Wuhan lab at the center of coronavirus pandemic. And that was us. Well, we worked with the Daily Mail and fed them that information. And that's how the world learned who paid for the pandemic. That was us. And to this day, I still get people asking me, well, you guys are you're the Beagle Group and the kittens and the Animalton monkeys. What the heck? I mean, okay, but lab leak? How did you guys get messed up? What were you doing with that? Well, man, I mean, the Wuhan lab is an animal lab. Gain-of-function research is animal research. A lot of people don't realize that. I mean, that's what it is. And it's not just animal research. It's our mission, taxpayer-funded animal research. It's a slam dunk for us. And this is where the magic happens. I mean, it's about reframing old issues in a new light, right? Organizations have been going against animal testing for a long time. I'm talking like 150 years, Reconstruction era. Of all the animal welfare issues out there, experimentation on animals is the oldest. It's the oldest one. But if you want to reach new people, if you want to bring libertarians, conservatives, the liberty curious, if you want to transcend the partisan gridlock, the old, tastes great, less filling. Yes, it works. No, it doesn't. We need it. No, we don't need it. I mean, that we've been there and done that. To do that, we have to come up with a new way of looking at an old issue and find new ways of talking about an old issue. Wuhan lab, animal testing caused the pandemic, killed, I don't know what it's up to, 20 million, give or take, whatever the numbers say. That's a new way of talking about an old issue, right? Dr. Fauci debarking dogs, that's a new way of talking about an old issue. That's what we do. We try to find new ways to talk about old issues. That's why we got involved with it, and that's how the world learned who funded it.
And you found this out for the standard FOIA request. This is something that you guys do systematically with these agencies. Is that accurate?
That one was slightly different with the lab leak, but the broader answer to your question is yes. FOIA. Freedom of Information Act requests galore. We like to say our MO here is fed. Taxpayers are fed up. We do federal public policy. Find, expose, defund, right? Find, we sleuth it out, follow the money. Freedom of Information Act requests, state level requests, sleuthing through the databases, triangulating research papers against grants. That's what we did with the EcoHealth expose, the famous one that alerted the world to it. We triangulated the published paper against the databases to follow the money. Find, expose, defund. Expose, well, we fed that information to the Daily Mail. The world saw it. We take out advertising too. And then defund, which was my revelation, again, working for years in politics. If you can fund something, you can defund it. It ain't easy. It doesn't happen that often, but you can do it. You can cut the purse strings for these programs.
One thing that you guys do, and as a cat owner and an animal lover, it's easier to get people fired up about beagle torture or cat torture, because we Americans, we love our pets. We're quite spoiled in our ability to take care of our animals as members of our family. So one of the things that I don't fully understand, but I see it happening, is you guys run viral grassroots campaigns, and the poster child is a cute puppy or a cute kitten. That's very clickable.
We try. We do our best. You do what works, and we do our best to light. With viral grassroots campaigns, though, Matt, the thing is, that's true, but you got to ignite that fire, and you've got to give people what they want. But there are also a lot of sad Sarah McLachlan from other organizations, not us. They run those sad Sarah McLachlan cat ads, and there's so many suffering animals out there, right? Not everybody is able to get people fired up and to take decisive action in DC and cut funding. So that's part of the equation. But I think there's a second part to this, and I think we don't do everything well, but one of the things I think we do well is the message. It's not just that the government is being bad to cats and dogs. That's old. It's that the government is forcing you. And you're going to bow down and do it whether you like it or not. Right? That's the new twist on the message, right? It has a potentiating effect for getting people fired up. Matt, you have no say. You're going to fund the taxpayer-funded torture of kittens and puppies, whether you like it or not. That's the secret sauce, right? It's waste, and government waste it is wasteful, but it's a shorthand for force. Government power. That's what a white coat is. It's an authoritarian in wearing a white lab, in the veneer of a white lab coat, telling you what to do, forcing you to pay, conscripting you into paying for abuse on your own pets, whether you like it or not. And you have no say. And I think that's the secret sauce.
Yeah, I like the metaphor of the white coat as an authoritarian tool as opposed to just an authority, right? So I think one of the things I learned over the last 4 years, and I knew this having worked on FDA issues and science funding going all the way back to the 1990s, but I didn't fully realize how intertwined government funding and dictating the terms of nominally private research and even the ownership of the intellectual property that comes out of that sort of research. I didn't realize how it was almost inseparable. What's private, what's public, it's one. And of course, the government is dictating the terms of those relationships.
I'm glad you mentioned the 90s again, because that's when it has been happening since the Reconstruction. But here's the thing. It really became a problem in the mid-90s. That's when this problem got started. The same year, 1995, I was working in the animal lab at 17 years old, is again when, Newt and a few others on the Hill decided this is going to be this is compassionate conservatism, right? We're going to shovel money at the NIH, right? They looked around the room, and these are legitimate, real diseases out there. We all get them. My family's gotten them. I'm going to get them one day. And they said, well, this is how we're going to look compassionate. This is the way we're going to do. We're going to shovel money with no questions asked at all to places like Fauci at the NIH. He's not the only one, but you get the idea. The NIH, the EPA, the USDA. This was what, a $6 billion problem, give or take, in 1995? It ain't now. We're talking well over $20 billion. Again, that's the year they began the process of doubling and then tripling the budget for the NIH with zero spending constraints at all on what they can do with that money. So a lot of our problems get tracked back to that era.
At Kibbe on Liberty, freedom is a lifestyle 24/7, something you live and breathe and wear every day. If that describes you, you need the very best Liberty swag in the market today, just like this shirt I happen to be wearing. Go to freethepeople.org/KOL and check out our exciting merch. You too can love Liberty and look cool.
So I'm going to date myself. You were 17 in 1995. I was a little bit older than that because I was working on the Hill. as a young staffer that, and I'm being triggered by this mention of Newt Gingrich, because remember, 1995 is the Republican Revolution, and we're cutting things. We're cutting things across the board. Gingrich has he's got a T-Rex skull in his office, famously or infamously, and he's got some sort of fascination, fetish with science. Maybe it was cynical politics, but I think it was also sort of a fatal conceit that the government could do this right. That science, like if science is good. We all agree science is good. But if we just dump billions of new money onto it, it's going to be great. Mm-hmm. And I actually made this argument. I was a young staffer when I was 30 or something, and making the argument at the leaders' healthcare task force meeting that government choosing winners and losers when it came to scientific research and determining that this paradigm shift is the right one, this one is bad. And everyone looked at me like I was an alien. Mm-hmm. They didn't get the point. Happily, a lot of Republicans, not all of them, but some of them now get it, that once you throw a lot of money at government bureaucrats, you end up with a cartel with no ethics, no sense of right and wrong, and lo and behold, you get gain-of-function research.
I wish they had listened to you. I mean, it's. I wish they had, and I wish I could have. I wish my career, I didn't have to be doing this work. I wish. I love what I do, but you get the point. It'd be more fun to lay on the beach. You go back to 1995, and this thinking in the room at the time that, okay, well, we don't trust government to manage the money well in every other place, every other vertical.
We're fighting government-run healthcare, but
well, NIH gets a pass. They got their act together. They're going to do a good job with the money, and we don't trust government to manage money well or solve problems anywhere else. But how did this happen? I mean, they're bureaucrats. They've got PhDs and fancy degrees, but they're not too good with the money. They've proven that. Wuhan lab leak. I mean, and beyond.
By the way, I'm told by friends, like they're the NIH and I call it the science industrial complex now. They were great lobbyists, and I am told that Anthony Fauci himself spent a lot of time in our congressional office. I was chief of staff for a Republican member from Florida. I don't remember him at all, but they worked the hallways even then, and it was again like an Achilles heel of the Republican Revolution.
It was a way for them to look compassionate, and we're not defunding everything, but we now know what that led to, and I wish we could go back and put the genie in the bottle. Well, we can't go back in time, but we can take down a lot of these terrible programs, right? We defeated Fauci on the Beagle tests. Congresswoman Nancy Mace, we work with all the time. In the summer of 2022, we worked together to block a proposed experiment on a series of five experiments on beagle puppies, 6-month-old, for testing hay fever medicines and ragweed drugs. Right? Again, why is that the NIH's role? Right? Anyway, long story short, they were planning to do these terrible experiments. I think it was about $1.7 million, give or take, of tax money. Those beagles were not going. The puppies weren't going to do too good in that. They're usually like oral gavage style experiments where they shove tubes down their mouths and they don't fare well. But we beat it. We stopped them. We intercepted the experiment, thanks to Congresswoman Mace and Senator Joni Ernst, and we defeated it. And it didn't take place. It was a proposed experiment. We've dismantled experiments with EcoHealth and others. For example, just breaking news right now, of course, is the talk of the town is the debarment or probable debarment of the EcoHealth Alliance, right? Not that long ago, we exposed their plan to construct a new bat lab in Colorado on American soil. They were going to import hundreds of bats from Asia, Bangladesh, bring them over here and abuse them, round the bats up, transport them back, and do experiments on them. Nipah, Ebola, Lassa, very, very dangerous right here on American soil in Colorado. And we've now confirmed, the Washington Times just had a front page news a day or two ago, I'm losing track of the days, but 48 hours ago, they had it front page news that the debarment of the EcoHealth Alliance extends to that bat lab. So we can intercept projects, we can shut projects down.
So that project was funded after the apparent lab leak in Wuhan, China?
Yes. So EcoHealth, since the pandemic itself, EcoHealth has raked in $60 million just since the pandemic that it probably caused.
Yeah.
So, and the bat lab in Colorado was I believe $8 million in Fed funds, another $5 million in state funds. The end recipient being Colorado. But EcoHealth did not do so great right now, but they were doing really well during the pandemic years.
It's like that seems insane to me, but it also seems like par for the course for government planners. I don't think anyone ever accepted any culpability or responsibility for potentially causing this, and the cover-up itself, you could argue, costs innumerable lives because we were not responding to the virus that we thought the experts told it was.
I'm not aware of any government bureaucrat who lost their job over this.
Yeah.
Not one. I don't know of any who's been none. I mean, I'm serious. I don't know of any who's lost their job over the greatest pandemic in our life. I mean, nobody lost their job over this.
And nobody has been held accountable yet for covering up their culpability in that. And all this while, the Congress is sending them new money for new bat research in Colorado.
$60 million since the pandemic they probably caused, and again I go back. One of the things there is room for optimism though. I do think we could be sad all day long about the growth of government and the seemingly intractable problem of government spending. I get it. But there are other rooms for bright spots. I do think there is room for hope, some optimism here. I adopted 2 cats from a nearly 50-year-old government program, 50 years of spending, in the destruction of over 5,000 cats and other animals at taxpayer expense. These legacy projects that go on years and years, decades and decades, you can dismantle them. It ain't easy, but you can do it. And the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the one I'm referencing, is how we got into the lab leak. That's how we discovered the lab leak money. I'll explain. Rewind in time to the spring of 2018. Okay, 2 years before the lockdown. It's April of 2018. And I get probably the most important phone call of my life. Actually, I didn't get the phone call. I was in a concert at Carnegie Hall. My phone was on airplane mode. I was watching a showing of Amadeus, the movie Amadeus live. I was with my folks, my parents, and the show's out. So walking out, and I take airplane mode off my phone. And there's 17 frantic-looking phone calls and messages that I missed. It's Justin Goodman, our friend, from my colleague from White Coat. He called me a number of times. I call him back. You're never going to guess what I just found. The U.S. Department of Agriculture, the USDA, has a kitten lab, and it's a big one. And it's been going on for decades. And I go, what the heck is the U.S. Department of Agriculture doing with cats? I mean, maybe cows and chickens, right? I mean, cats? We don't eat cats. Well, turns out they were feeding the cats rotten meat for, again, decades upon decades. It was taxpayer funded for about 50 years. And they were feeding them rotten meat with toxoplasmosis germs. And at 10 to 12 weeks, so about 3 months, these kittens, they were collecting their poop, collecting the germs, and then slaughtering and incinerating the kittens. Literally, they picked them up by the scruff of the neck, stuck a needle right in their little beating hearts. These are 3-month-old kittens, okay, and burned them all. And it had been going on for nearly 50 years. They claim it was 22.5 million. We think it's more than that. But anyway, what the heck does this have to do with the lab leak? Well, we run a major intensive grassroots campaign for a year, Find, Expose, Defund. We unite Republicans and Democrats in 2019. We get everybody from Roger Stone on the right to Cory Booker on the left. The forces unite. We encircle and destroy the lab, destroy its funding, and took down a 50-year-old program. Breaks down. But the straw that broke the camel's back with the USDA, right, was an investigation we did that they weren't just killing the cats here in the lab. You see, they were also rounding up cat and dog meat in China, Ethiopia, Vietnam, and other foreign countries, going around to these wet markets in China, bringing the dogs and cats back to the United States in their personal carry-on luggage on a plane, and feeding the remains to the cats right here in the laboratory. So think about that. Kitten cannibalism experiments, cats eating cats in the Beltway. And they were rounding them up from China. That was enough. That investigation broke the back of the USDA, and we shut the lab down. I adopted 2 of the breeding moms myself, but here's
let's see a
cat
picture.
Yeah, and here is so what you're looking. So this is Delilah, government ID number 87 in her ear.
You can see the government prison tattoo on her right ear.
And she had 22 kittens at the USDA who were slaughtered and incinerated. Her bloodlines, actually, they traced back to the first cat abused by the government in the late 60s. Right. And this is Lil Petit, who is sadly passed away and broke my heart. Just a few months ago. You can see again the prison tattoo in her ear. She was another breeding mom. Petite was a tiny little kitten, just under 5 pounds. She was sold to the USDA by a corporate Envigo-style breeding mill, and they forced her to become a breeder for kittens who were also slaughtered and incinerated, eat the cats from China, from the wet markets. And the greatest day of my life was shutting down a 5-decade-old federal program and giving a home to the survivors, including Petite, who's no longer with us.
Not to go down this path too far, but tell me about how the survivors were rescued. Like, what happened to those that were left?
That's a fascinating story, and I'll tell you, it's so there were not that many cats left. I think it was a little over 2 dozen, I think. Here's the thing, Matt. This is interesting because they were sold on it as excess government property. They were sold for $1 each. My 2 cats. It turns out the USDA had no policy to retire spent lab animals to taxpayers and pet owners, right, as pets. Most federal agencies have no policies to let healthy survivors, once the experiment's over, to let people adopt the cat, the dog, or other animals. USDA had no policy, so they had to put them up on a federal auction for $1 each, and we were able to secure them that way.
Thank you for joining me today on Kibbe on Liberty and for being part of our fiercely independent audience. Every week, my organization, Free the People, partners with BlazeTV to bring you this show. My guests bring smart perspectives on everything from current events to timeless philosophical debates. If you like what you hear, go to freethepeople.org/KOL and support Kibbe on Liberty so we can continue to produce these honest conversations with interesting people. Now, let's get back to it.
So back to kitten torture gate. You expose this. The USDA has to shut this program down, but this led to new discoveries.
Oh yeah, I mean it led to discoveries that really this is where the legacy of Lil Petite, who's no longer with us, her legacy's Cat leaves a very big legacy here, because that Daily Mail piece that we fed to the newspaper that alerted the world to U.S. taxpayers funded the lab. Well, how did we have that? We had it by accident, and we had it by accident because after we shut Petite and Delilah, my two cats, lab down at the USDA, we were already hot on the trail of China. And we said, well, what else is our government funding in China? Surely this isn't the only one. It turns out it wasn't I wish it was, but it wasn't. And so we started at the end of so the USDA lab was shut down in 2019. And we immediately prioritized looking at federal funding from other acronym agencies like the NIH to China and foreign countries. Senator Rand Paul we worked with him on the waste book that put the smoking fish out in the UK, in Great Britain. It was all legacy.
There's birds on cocaine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there are bats and humanized mice gain of function experiments too. You see, we looked at the NIH list of PHS assured labs, right? The ones that are authorized to take money. I think at the time so now it's early 2020, there's this mystery flu in Wuhan, China. It's not a pandemic yet, it's an epidemic. This is now January of 2020. And the NIH at the time, I think it was 27, 28, give or take, about 30 labs in China that were authorized for tax money. 2 in the city of Wuhan alone. So Justin and I, we know we were hot on the trail for 2 years, thanks to my cats. This is a big story, we think, and we start shopping it around. Nobody's interested. I mean, it's like Wall Street Journal, New York Times types. They were not, they were never going to cover this. It was a conspiracy theory. We all know that story. It was nonsense. So long story short, we had we tried to get a meeting with the White House, and we got one. We went with Louise Linton, the wife of the former wife of the Treasury Secretary at the time. So we had a meeting, and we thought we just wanted to cut labs, animal testing labs. We wanted to repeat the success, and we had a meeting. Among a lot of other topics on the agenda in January of 2020 was foreign funding of animal testing labs in China. We were just trying to be pragmatic. We thought the Trump administration would want to do something about this. So it's January 2020. We pitched the story again. It's not going anywhere. Reporters are not interested. They're not covering it. Now it's Easter Sunday of 2020, approximately 2 years after Petite, weaned her last baby. And we blow the scandal up. The Daily Mail wants it. It was the shot heard around the world that we funded our own pandemic. The United States government did it. We did it by accident, and we're proud of it. It's some of the greatest discoveries in life happen that way. I had never heard of gain of function. Okay, I never heard the term in my life in those years. I didn't even know about gain of function when we first exposed the lab leak. I learned about it later from my friends at Drastic, and they were doing great. I mean, just God's work of following the science for the real science, and poking holes in the nonsense about wet markets. I myself, even when we exposed the lab leak money, we follow the money, not the science here. But at White Coat Waste, but I myself, I didn't think, I thought maybe, but I still think I'm thinking wet markets. It's what they said. It's what the authorities said. And, it's the
why would they lie? Why would they lie?
Why would they lie? Government lies from time to time. I get it. But, the first SARS was legitimately from the markets. I gave them the benefit of the doubt. But I didn't know anything about gain of function or anything. I read a paper from Steve Quay, Dr. Quay, showing a Bayesian analysis about the probabilities for a lab leak are way off the charts compared to natural the Wuhan wet market natural origin theory. Anyway, so this was several months after we exposed the lab leak money, and I just said, okay, this is not just possible anymore. This is outright probable. But obviously over the years, I learned a hell of a lot more about gain of function. The infamous Fauci emails with Peter Daszak saying, that's terrific, our gain of function pause has been, I'm paraphrasing here, our gain of function pause has been lifted. I mean, we, White Coat Waste, uncovered that gain of function email, the smoking gun emails, via a lawsuit. We sued Fauci, we sued NIH in a court of law, and we won. And we forced them to hand over the Freedom of Information Act emails. I thank my cats. The American taxpayers in the world owes them, gratitude for
your cats may well have saved the world.
I'm very proud of their legacy, and little cat, little petite, leaves a pretty big legacy, and she's not with us anymore. But the work goes on, and we've got a lot of work to do.
So much of this sounds like mad science, and we were talking about this beforehand, but I want to dig into this a little bit because we talked about the explosion in science research funding through NIH that started with Republicans in 1995. Mm-hmm. Apparently the reason why Fauci probably still is the highest paid employee in the federal government is that he was drafted somewhere around 2001 to come up with a sweeping government biosecurity strategy. Apparently, I've read all this, and I'm in the process right now of hopefully getting to the bottom of this through an investigative series I'm doing with Rand Paul, Jay Bhattacharya, mm-hmm. Charles Rixey from Drastic, mm-hmm. and I want to talk a little bit more about them as well. But and supposedly for the best intended reasons in the world, we thought, we're going to go harvest all of these deadly viruses.
Virus hunting, yeah.
Yeah, and we're going to go, harvest them from bat caves, and then we're going to start manipulating them through gain of function, and we're going to come up with the most dangerous viruses imaginable, the kind that would wipe out humanity, and then we're going to come up with a solution, mm-hmm. like presumably a vaccine for each one of these. This all came out of the war on terror, yeah. and the drastic expansion of the security state. I'm going to call it the biosecurity state. But we now know that this was going on. It was happening in plain sight for all those years, and it strikes me as a combination of just zombie-like bureaucratic activity, where there's money. I'll come up with a plan, mm-hmm. but also like a fatal conceit where they're like, you can definitely trust us not to slip up on this.
Yeah.
We're going to create these devastating things. And by the way, when when rational scientists say this is wildly dangerous and you're going to create some sort of humanitarian catastrophe, then we're going to offshore it to China, mm-hmm. which presumably would be on the list of a country that we might be somewhat suspicious of when it came to creating a bioweapon that might harm Americans. Make this make sense to me.
Yeah, I can't. I can't, and this is how we end up with pandemic. Make it make sense to me how we were around, paying Chinese experimenters to carry dog and cat meat on their personal luggage back to the United States and feed it to the kittens of my cat.
If you hadn't documented that, it would be like, that is the wildest, stupidest conspiracy theory I've ever heard, except that they were doing it.
Well, yeah, and when we exposed that, the Washington Post ran with it, and they loved us then. And you fast forward 2 years into Beaglegate and Lab Leak, and the Washington Post turned on us, and they called us with Lab Leak. The Washington Post called us COVID misinformation. They called us conspiracy mongers and so forth. You can't make it make sense. This stuff is stranger than fiction. And I don't, the hubris of the feds to, whether it's, war on drugs, war on terror, war on,
Fill in the blank.
viruses.
Yeah.
I mean, this time we can manage it well.
Yeah.
This time it's different, right? But this goes back to that spirit of 1995. It's like, you see, Matt. No. You see, NIH is different. They're in very capable hands, right? They have white coats.
Yeah, they're wearing
and
white
degrees, and they follow the science. But they manage. They clearly have a return on investment strategy here. Well, do they? Right? I mean, well, they don't. It's you've seen Ghostbusters, right? The great scene, Dan Aykroyd and sitting outside of the library, and no, you don't understand how it works in the private sector. They demand results, right? When they lost their jobs as academics, well, there's truth to this. It's the USDA. That experiment was taxpayer funded for nearly 50 years, right? What return on investment? None. It just goes on decade after decade after decade. Well, this time we'll get it. This time we'll get it. The private sector doesn't fund. They do fund animal experiments, but that's another story. But they don't fund a lot of it. And when they do, they want a quick ROI. They have investors. They're accountable to shareholders. The Fed's not so much. That's how the longer the program goes on, the more trusted it is, actually. The longer it's on the dole, the more money it gets, the more established it gets, the less, the more respect it gets. That's exactly kind of the opposite in the private sector. But this spirit of 95 that, we put everything on the NIH track, virus hunting now, because, they're different. They have their act together. They're not going to fail like war on drugs or war on terror or anything. They got their act together. Well, we now know that they're no different. They're no different.
So when did this, the only reason we know about this is your heroic cats and this happy accident that you discovered this while you were trying to stop something else. But I want to learn more about Drastic. Mm-hmm. And some people watching this know what that is, but it's basically a cabal of very smart citizen investigators that refuse to accept the government narrative, and became more and more suspicious about that narrative, and eventually blew the lid on this whole thing.
Absolutely.
And you're a member of Drastic.
And I was invited to join one of the
Do
greatest.
You get capes like?
We don't wear white coats either, but it's Drastic is a citizen.
What's it stand for?
Decentralized Radical Autonomous Search Team for COVID Origins, and the cool acronym. But it's they're heroes, and these were citizen sleuths who solved the mystery before the government before anybody did. And I remember, Drastic was following the science and the real science and showing this is nonsense, that this thing came from bat soup. It did come, it most likely came from a lab leak. And Twitter folks, just amateurs reading the papers and poking holes in the lies that our government was telling us. I was looking at what they were putting out on Twitter by just seeing it end of 2020, give or take. Remember, we're at, by that point, we're now 5-6 months after exposing the money trail. I didn't know anything about the science. I didn't know I still assumed it probably came from a wet market. Even though we blew the lid on the money funding the lab, I still kind of suspected it probably still actually was caused by the wet markets. Well, Drastic changed my mind about that. I start looking at their tweets and the team of just doing heroes who uncovered the greatest scandal in the history of the federal government. And they persuaded me, and I start reading about what our government was doing with gain of function, and souping up the viruses, and they were actually doing it here, and it makes no sense that I knew about. Obviously, we exposed the money for EcoHealth, rounding up the bats in southern China, transporting them thousands of miles to Wuhan, and supercharging the viruses, but. It was marrying, in my mind, personally speaking, marrying what they found on the science against the money. And then I said, Oh my gosh. I mean, they actually did do it. It wasn't possible. It was probable. And the world owes them drastic a great deal of gratitude for whether, inconvenient truth, sure, but a truth.
I was just talking to Tulsi Gabbard about this, and one of the things that you can be optimistic about. Like I could be in a very dark place after the last 4 years, and all of the tremendous damage done to humanity and the American system and our liberties, and the list goes on and on. But one of the reasons I'm optimistic about this vast censorship complex that went after you guys, went after Drastic, went after anybody that raised any questions about anything, and you got all these alphabet agencies, the entire security complex, going through some guy's tweets. And I'm like, they're desperate. Mm-hmm. They are afraid of the power of decentralized knowledge and the ability of people.
It's their worst nightmare.
Yeah.
It's their worst nightmare. Francis Collins, who was the overall NIH boss, the director, Francis Collins said that we, White Coat Waste, should be, quote, brought to justice, rounded up and brought to justice. That's what he said about us after the exposing the Beaglegate and Fauci with the Beagle. That's what he told the Washington Post.
Such an ominous phrase coming out of the words of an unchecked bureaucrat. I'm going to bring one of my guys up on the table.
It's fascistic. It's
appropriate. So, what do you think? I'm breaking protocol here. So Peter Daszak and EcoHealth are finally on the chopping block, but this is the beginning of the process. Like, even if we hold them accountable,
it is the referred for debarment for EcoHealth. We'll have to see. I mean, it is the beginning of the process. The debarment's usually about 3 years, usually in most cases. But we don't know because
debarment is you're disqualified from getting
suspension, blacklisting of federal funding. Yes. That's right, and that should be the death blow for EcoHealth. Usually, in most cases, these debarments are 3 years. But Wuhan WIV itself, once we finally got that sucker debarred, that's a 10-year debarment. I mean, this is breaking news. We'll have to see, but it's great news, and this is why I say we still have to be glass half full. We have to smile and cheer at the victories. It is depressing work what we do, exposing unchecked government power and spending. It feels like we never win.
Yeah.
But we do win. We lose a lot too, but there are wins. I mean, we can take down federal power centers. We can take down the U.S. Department of Agriculture was not just any cat lab. That was the largest kitten lab in the United States federal government. Totally annihilated. We can do this, and we can take down. People are waking up about EcoHealth and the Wuhan lab. Not everybody, but the polls show most taxpayers now blame the lab. Thank you, Senator Rand Paul. Thank you, Drastic, White Coat Waste, of course. I mean, a lot of heroes involved in this. We have to celebrate these victories. The good guys can win, and we can't. Otherwise, we'll all feel suicidal.
Right.
Of loss.
We also have to be aware that this can't just be a game of whack-a-mole where we shut down EcoHealth, but some other even shadier organization emerges through pass-through money for this.
That's exactly right. In EcoHealth, look, we have to the Colorado Bat Lab. This should spell doom, right? I don't know of anybody else. EcoHealth is probably the only game in town to be able to do the importation of those bats from Bangladesh to the Colorado lab. Now, Colorado's not debarred, but we now, the Washington Times has confirmed that the debarment will stop EcoHealth from giving them money and giving them bats. So we have to be vigilant. We have to be vigilant all the time, but we can also be strategic too about these wins, right? I mean, the USDA kitten lab, that I said, it's not just a random cat lab in the United States. That was the largest one in the government. It sets a precedent. So right now at the USDA, we're also fighting their $1 million grant for more gain-of-function bird flu in collaboration with Wuhan lab associated experimenters. Bird flu, even more dangerous than COVID, supercharged on gain-of-function, right? So, but but that USDA, right? So that we got several members of Congress to fire off a letter, bipartisan effort. And in that letter, Senator Ernst led, Joni Ernst of Iowa, she references my cats, the rounding up of cat and dog meat from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, right? So these one thing can lead to the next, right? Every win should be strategic and form the building blocks for the next thing. Like my cats led to investigation into EcoHealth that exposed it. Now we're doing it we're taking the seeds of that victory to try and stop the next one with USDA. So we got to be strategic. Otherwise, you're right. We get a game of whack-a-mole. We're chasing this, chasing that, random stuff. Everything needs to be strategic and build to the next victory and investigation.
So tell us where people can find the work that you do, why and how they should support your work, and what you think the next specific battle is.
Well, thank you, Matt, as always, for showing helping us get the word out and working with us. We really love it and appreciate everything you do. Whitecoatwaste.org, whitecoatwaste.org. We're working on a new website. We're going to get a good one soon, but we're working on it. That's the URL, though. Of course, social media. Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. White Coat Waste. White Coat Waste is the best way to just stay involved, stay on top of what we're doing. Join our list if you want. And, the battles are the next battle. Well, it's the big one we're fighting here at home. Is we're trying to put the final nail in the coffin of painful experimentation inside the U.S. government on cats and kittens. Right now, we have ground zero is at the Stokes Veterans Affairs Lab in Ohio. This is another project we're trying to intercept. They're trying to do an experiment causing pain and distress to 7 cats in Cleveland. If we stop this experiment, again, we can do this. We can intercept these proposed plans like EcoHealth, like Nancy Mace with Fauci's dogs. We can stop them before they start, right? If we stop the Stokes experiment in Cleveland, we will have eradicated all pain and painful experiments on cats and kittens inside the United States government, and that would be historic. I think Rourke and your cats would approve of that too. And that's our battle at the moment.
Reardon is in the house, but as all cats are, he's a libertarian, and he doesn't join unless he wants to. That's just the way it is. You know this, by the way, that cats are libertarians.
Dogs are commies.
Dogs are commies. And this is upsetting when people learn this, but it's a fundamental truth.
Yeah, we White Coat Waste fights for both sides, fights for all of them, dogs and cats. I personally am on Team Cat. Delilah and Petite were my cats, and I'm Team Cat. But hey,
we'll let Team Dog talk trash about me in the comments, but they're wrong.
Sides.
We're right. That's just the way it is.
We'll fight for both sides too, though.
Thank you for doing this. This was very informative.
Thank you for everything.
Thanks for watching. If you liked the conversation, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and also ring the bell for notifications. And if you want to know more about Free the People, go to freethepeople.org.